Marriage, gender roles, family life, and child rearing. Premarital sex and marriage. The home became more important for men and women, and the idea of romantic love prospered. More people from different towns and more people at a closer age range got together. Lengthy courtship and mercenary marriage depleted by the 1850s. After 1850, economic concerns in marriage were more important to the middle class than to the working class. In France, marriage was as important financial transactions, and dowries as well as marriage contracts were common practice among the middle class. During this time, mothers supervised their daughter's romantic life and guarded her virginity like a watchdog. 1750 to 1850, the illegitimacy explosion. This was a time when many kids were being born to unmarried parents. Why? Because poverty and economic problems prevented many from marrying, and the poor and the propertyless thought illegitimate offspring weren't that bad. However, some regions didn't experience this explosion. For example, there were some places that did not encounter any industrialization or urbanization, and there were churches that prohibited premarital sex. In the second half of the 19th century, Western, Northern, and Central Europe had more babies born to married mothers. After 1850, the percentage of pregnant brides showed little to no tendency to decline. Unmarried people used condoms and diaphragms to prevent pregnancy, and the amount of people engaging in sexual interaction during the 19th century was about the same amount as the people that started the illegitimacy explosion. However, pregnancy for a young single woman led to marriage at a two-parent household. The urban working class couple essentially became more stable in marriage. Prostitution. Prostitution was a way women could earn easy money. Between 1871 and 1893, 155,000 women were registered as prostitutes in just Paris, and 750,000 were suspected. Men from all classes took part in this, but the primary visitors came from the middle and upper class. In fact, there is even an anonymously written book called My Secret Life, an autobiography of an Englishman's sexual life. Prostitution was usually only a stage of a woman's life, not a lifelong career. Kinship ties. For newlyweds, the ties to relatives became much stronger in the working class homes. Relatives helped families cope with unemployment, death, old age, and sickness. They also helped with funerals, babysitting, and they even shared outgrown clothes and Sunday dinners. Usually, the members of a large family stayed in the same neighborhood. After the 1850s, families started to become more and more distant. The husbands in the family would spend most of their day working at a factory or office and wouldn't come home until late. While the husbands were at work, the wives were at home taking care of the home and the children. They would feed the children and have to clean the home. This is what the wives did all day. This was called the separate spheres. Also during this time, the women had very little rights. They couldn't own property unless they were married, and every decision was mostly favored toward the men. Many middle-class women fought for their equal right. In 1882, English married women got full property rights. Women kept fighting for their rights, and many organizations were created because of this. Female feminists based their ideas off of Karl Marx and his socialism plan. Women saw this as equal to men and fought with it. This created the feminist group. They believed that they were the exact same as men. They would rebel against the men. One English feminist said that though legally women occupy a much inferior status than men, in practice they constitute the superior sex. They are the power behind the throne. Women dominated the household. It was a very complex and demanding task. They often worked another job as well to supplement the husband's work. When the husband was home, it was the woman's job to pamper him and make sure his needs get fulfilled before her own. All the chores were up to the woman, while the husband and children relaxed. There was an increased emotional importance because of this. When the home was more desirable to be at, the more the people respected it. Many people even coined slogans for their houses. During this time, the saying, "Home sweet home," was first used. With all the joy associated with living at home, it soon became the main reason why people were living. It was their purpose for life. Affection between the married couples increased greatly. Love was more important than sexual attraction. Younger women who married older men became more pleasurable and intimate, so motherhood was more widely accepted. Franziska Tiburtius demonstrated what women were capable of. She was a pioneer of German medicine. She believed talent, determination, and economic necessity were key to success. She worked as a governess as well as a doctor. In medical school, she thrived, and she met Emily Lemus. They opened a clinic. It became very successful, and eventually they had to open a second. They were the only women doctors in Berlin, and they became an inspiration to women all over. Child rearing. Mothers began to give infants love and support. Many children tended to die early in life, so mothers wouldn't get too emotionally attached to their children in case they died. Mothers began to sacrifice their own time for breastfeeding their own children, instead of having a wet nurse to do so. Children began to have emotional ties as well. The women were limited to the number of children they had in order to care deeply for the ones they already had. At the end of the 19th century, the birth rate was declining across Europe. The reason that they had a reduction on family size was so the parents could have a strong and sturdy base with their economic and social positions. The parents, however, began to care too much for their children and put a lot of pressure on them, making the child feel like they were never good enough. Parents regulated the sexual behavior, dieting, clothing, games, and sleeping hours of their child. The mother and child tended to have a better relationship than the father and child because the father was a lot harsher on the sexuality restrictions. Sigmund Freud formed an analysis on the dynamics of a family. He treated ill patients and noticed that the illness of their feelings originated from their childhood with their parents and the relationships they had with them. All this led to one of his mental devices called defense mechanisms. The working classes, however, could escape some of these family tensions. It was mainly the middle class that suffered this, because a child from a working class family could break away from their family more easily. By the 20th century, the middle class youth followed in the same path as the working class kids. That is the background on the youth during the 19th century.